And yeah, increasingly Americans don't have the luxury of saying take this job and shove it. You'll recall that song was from 20, 30 years ago, and back then you could, because we had a lot of jobs in America, and they were good paying jobs, and the reason we had them was because we had a trade policy. It was before we had turned over to the transnational corporations like Carly Fiorina's Hewlett-Packard the decisions to be made on our trade and our corporate trade and corporate tax policies. Let me just share with you a little bit more of this CNNmoney.com article. This is not, again, the headlines. Americans are overpaid. For the global economy to rebalance, the pay gap between Americans and the rest of the world must shrink, by Martin Hutchinson and Edward Hadas. November 11, 2009. U.S. workers are overpaid relative to equally productive foreigners doing the same work. If the global economy is ever to get it back into balance, that gap needs to be closed. Yep. So if somebody in North Korea is willing to do the work with a gun to their head for $1 a day, you should too. The difference in productivity is making goods that can be traded across borders and the quantity of such tradable goods. Both measures point to a narrowing wage gap. The global wage gap has been narrowing, but recent U.S. labor market statistics suggest the adjustment has not gone far enough. One explanation for the attractive prices of imported goods is that U.S. workers are paid too much relative to their foreign peers. Let me just start out by putting a stake into the heart of that argument. The cost of labor in most manufactured goods is less than 10%. You buy a toy in Walmart, you buy a TV set in Walmart, you buy a computer at the computer store, whatever. It's all made in China, all those things. The cost of labor in those things, even seemingly labor-intensive things like shoes or clothing, the cost of labor is typically less than 10%. The big costs in the United States are doing business in a way that doesn't cause cancer to people, doing business in a way that doesn't destroy neighborhoods, in doing business in a way that doesn't destroy life, in not polluting, in not dumping toxic waste into streams and rivers, in not pouring crap and crud that kills people and gives them asthma into the air. That's the biggest expense. And that's one of the reasons why, although I generally disagree with them, when big D Democratic politicians, and even a few Republicans, say that the main thing that we need to do around the world is make our trade, our bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, to bring their environmental standards up to ours, even if and bring their wages up to what's fair for that country, but obviously they're not going to come up to our wages. And also have the corporations pay taxes that actually reflect their share of the commons, which they're not doing in many of these other countries. Because they're being subsidized by the countries, because the countries are trying to grow. There is some truth to that. The reason stuff is cheap in Walmart is only about 5 or 10% of the reason why stuff is cheap in Walmart is because people overseas are willing to work for less. It's because you can make things in China in ways that kill people. Labor standards are not enforced. Safety standards are not enforced. That's the real big thing. But these guys want to focus on wages. Why? Because if you focus on wages in the United States, you can jack up the salaries of American CEOs really nicely. And that's really what it's all about. One explanation for the attractive prices of imported goods is that U.S. workers are paid too much relative to their foreign peers. Global wage convergence is great for the poor, but tough on the overpaid rich. It's possible to run the numbers to show that U.S. manufacturing workers should take real wage cuts of as much as 20% to get into global balance. Well, hell, why not make it 100%? Why not make it 90% anyway? I mean, if a worker in China is making 30 cents an hour and a worker in the United States is making $3 an hour, isn't that a 90% cut? If I'm doing my math right. No, a 90% cut would be from $30 an hour to $3 an hour. That's a 300% cut, or a 900%, whatever. I can't do math backwards that fast. I'm sorry, but you get the point. But if U.S. wages get stuck above global market clearing levels, as in the 1930s, say what? The result could well be something approaching the 1930s level of employment. This is the economic equivalent of calling Barack Obama a Nazi at a Tea Party. It has nothing to do with anything. The reason that the Great Depression happened in the United States had nothing to do with our employers being paid or our employees being paid too much. In fact, when we started paying our employees money, first through the employer of last resort, the government, through the WPA, the CCC, and all these other programs, it started getting us out of the Depression when we raised the minimum wage. And every time we've raised the minimum wage since 1935, we see our economy grow. When we started taxing the very rich, we saw the economy grow. When we started building infrastructure, we saw the economy grow. And as the economy grew with the increasing strength of labor unions, we saw wages grow because wages are demand. This is economics 101. You have supply and you have demand. Demand is created by people having money in their pocket to buy things. And that happens when they get a good wage. Supply is created by their being productive. What has happened in the last 30 years in the United States is that productivity has continued to increase. Supply has continued to increase. But wages have fallen off. So how did we maintain demand? We encouraged working people to, instead of using the money in their pocket that they used to have from wages, because they don't have that anymore, to use credit. To use their credit card and to use their home as an ATM. And we've reached the limit of that. And unless we change our wage policies and get them back to where they were in the 70s and 80s, we're going to continue to see this mess. And it has nothing to do with paying Americans $1 an hour.